installation, but the activity or the review or documentation is still the same. There's no difference there. So the time spent for an offsite installation will be still same by an MWS when it comes to as against a manifold installation. So if a budget is allotted, keeping in mind, oh, this is just a small project, it's just a manifold installation, why should I keep this much budget for an MWS? Doesn't hold good there. But unfortunately, that's what is happening now. So this is what is that when you have insufficient budgets for MWS scope, which leads to restrictive hours budget for performance of documentation review. So as an MWS, if we have allotted, if we have a project which we know we have to do as an MWS, we have an allotted amount of money and allotted amount of time to each documentation review, we restrict those hours. So then if less hours are spent, you know, that reduces due diligence time on the documentation review, which is not sometimes good. So we need to understand that as project teams, that we need to give sufficient budgets to MWS to perform their job, because as I had already discussed before, they tend to over-rely on third party for these risk hazards as compared to themselves. Then we as MWS, having been exposed to various projects, we as MWS can give additional marine expertise support to these project teams, but when the budgets are restricted, the MWS teams at times, we have seen that they limit themselves also with regards to involving more with not just MWS but sharing expertise with the clients. And clients also, or the project teams also at times have a tendency to limit the MWS attendance scope, thinking that, hey, this job is not that big, let us avoid MWS attendance and reduce or cut costs there, which has happened. And I have myself seen that it has happened, and a claim has come out of it. So, and the client was not covered because the MWS was not present in that scenario. And also, when it comes to the scope not clear, which leads to the case that when the projects at times overrun their schedule, then this leads to major scope changes or discussions between the client and MWS. And now if there is any attendance which is required, the MWS will attend and to cover the scope and protect the insurer's interest, but at the same time the invoices are still outstanding because you have not yet freezed the overrun of the schedule as per the contract. Also, every year we see that the budget's getting tighter. There's more pressure on MWS to reduce its costs, and that again puts a downward pressure. As such, we see that the rates are coming down drastically. So the work is not coming down, or the amount of work that needs, or the activities have not come down, but the rates are expected to come down, which is again not a good situation. So with that, I'd just like to close this presentation that yes, a proactive and a technically qualified MWS does make a difference. As an MWS, it's important to understand for project teams that MWS will not be able to eliminate a risk. The only thing that we can help to reduce the risk. So that in turn is on project teams also to identify and mitigate marine risks. And finally, the amount by which the MWS can affect risk reduction is directly related to the level of support given to them by the assured. So this again is the point of having synergizing with the MWS teams, so that MWS also can further help you to risk reduction. Thank you everyone for listening to my presentation. Thank you. I have a difficult task of holding people before the lunch, so I'll try my best not to hold you long. Hello everyone, welcome to this wonderful seminar. I must say all the previous presentations have been very informative and very, very intellectual. I hope I can match up to those standards, what people have already said. Yeah. This is basically what I'll be covering in my presentation today. A brief company profile where I belong to, and then the projects, the offshore project risk areas, the challenges that are faced by marine warranty surveyors, the resulting issues faced by marine warranty surveyors, and then a short closing statement on it. Basically, I belong to Murray Fenton India. Murray Fenton India has been into this field for past 30-35 years, and we are a good group of naval architects, marine engineers, naval structural engineers, master mariners, covering. Basically, in India we cover the west coast and the east coast, and now we are slowly but surely keeping our eyes on international markets, Middle East and Singapore. These are our target clients, the oil majors, ship owners, underwriters, shipyards, offshore contractors, banks, lenders, and class societies. These are our capabilities wherein Murray Fenton India is providing services to marine and offshore consulting, marine and offshore operations, design and engineering, and project management. Now, when we come to projects, what are the biggest challenge to operations at sea? The biggest challenge is offshore marine environment. I would like you all to have a look at a very short video before we actually go forward. As a marine warranty surveyor, you would not want to see this actually happening when you are issuing a certificate of approval. Just saw the whole jacket was lost there. Risk versus time. Yes, for operations which are standardized and over the years the risks are well identified, generally you tend to cover and identify those risks and over the period of time. But for operations which are not standardized, or basically they are non-standard operations or some new technology, but then the risks are unidentified, and that leads to a potential hazardous case, which further, when in due course of time, you identify and then tend to reduce the risk. But for new operations, this becomes a very, very critical issue. Now, when we are talking of offshore project and offshore project risk areas, basically I'm just mapping major risk areas which involves projects. Is shortage of marine qualified personnel on projects. The project schedules are getting tighter day by day. Tighter budgets goes without saying. Everyone wants to save money. Cost cutting. Shortage of marine spread. And local content requirements. And finally, materials, equipment quality control. Now we'll just slowly go into each and every risk area. Shortage of marine qualified personnel. Generally, we see that in any project team, now it is basically seen more in modern day environment that a project team generally does not have inclusion of marine expertise within them, and even if they have the marine expertise, they don't cover all the domains of marine expertise, which is very, very important. And then there's some kind of reluctance to use expertise or resource from less familiar territories, which is again I would say it's a roadblock. We need to change that mentality, but it still exists. And then the training opportunities are not sufficient. This leads to, if we don't have sufficient qualified personnel, then it clearly then takes us to overworking of people who are existing or working on the projects, which again is a great risk. And then the project teams tend to over-rely on the third-party service providers like the MWS or class to cover the risks which they should be doing, or identifying the risks which a project team within themselves should be doing. Shorter project schedules. Yes, the time is in essence, is what everyone says. Project teams are now fighting to reduce the schedules, and the areas, clearly they try to cut times the design or engineering phase. So the pre-feed, feed or detailed design, this kind of engineering which used to go in series now goes parallel. You have got at least two phases going parallel, which is not a good sign. You need to go into a series mode rather than a parallel mode. But unfortunately, to cut time, these methods are used, which basically then takes us to the next stage, wherein the reliability of the design or engineering is then a big question mark, because already you have compromised on the time required to carry out each phase individually. Now you're doing parallelly, so that again compromises the design. And then when we are trying to push schedules in shorter duration, we generally take our safe environmental limits to the boundaries, which again is a very, very riskier proposition there. Tighter project budgets. Money is of matter to everyone. But what has happened now is in the project teams, what we have generally seen is people are more commercial people are there in the teams, project teams for operators and contractors, rather than having marine and engineering biased teams. So when we have more project-minded and more commercial-minded teams into that, then they'll tend to overlook certain hazards which more the domain expertise which lies with marine and engineering teams will not be captured. Then the mentality of L1, that the lowest bidder gets this. And I think you are more experienced than me to know that the cheapest option is never the best, not always the best option. But that's how the game is. Not many operators or contractors go beyond this mentality, which needs to be changed. Then also we are not putting in an effort or money to provide training in non-safety related issues. We generally give emphasis to safety, yes, but there are other training also non-safety related which needs to be imparted so that we can, which in a way will connect you to safety. But that is also, we see that there is a lack of money going into it. And then incompatibility of projects with MWS scope. This topic I'll take it a bit later in another slide and delve more detail into it. And I'm sure all of our MWS surveys here will agree to that. Then shortage of marine spread. This item is becoming critical day by the day. There are last minute vessel substitutions because the vessel which was on a previous project has got delayed, and hence you don't get that vessel, and now you have to find another vessel at last moment. So what does that do? That puts you into an issue of having to accept at times a marginal or insufficient capability vessel, which puts you at a greater risk and project overall at a greater risk. And then because of the short turnaround from one project to another, the vessels do not get sufficient time to basically do the maintenance, which again is a big issue. And then also the concern is when the tried and tested vessels which are not available, you tend to go to newer vessels. I'm not saying newer vessels are not good, but they're not tried, and then you tend to use them with no past records on critical issues or critical operations, and then you offer it to MWS for approval. Local content requirements. Basically this is also well documented that we, at places wherein we need to use local personnel which may not be experienced enough, and they are put to critical operations which exposes you or puts you to a greater risk. And similarly, you have to use local equipment, local vessels, which again may not have been maintained over the years to the offshore industrial standards. So that again exposes us and everyone to risks. This is also part of it, that wherein now as the project schedules are getting shorter and the material and equipment required is required in shorter lead times and also at lower costs. So then what you do is you tend to go to suppliers who are not from standard or traditional sources, but you tend to find new places wherein they are not tried and tested, they may not be certified, and sometimes the documentation that comes along with those equipment which are sourced from certain vendors may not be to the level that satisfies an MWS, but they are still offered for MWS approval. So these are basically the issues which has come out of those project risk areas that are faced by MWS at large. Late engagement of MWS. This is the critical item, that's why I've put it on the first line, because now the schedules are such that the jobs to the contractors are not being contracted or given to a very late time. So then at that point of time the MWS is involved, and wherein you could have got some kind of an interaction phase that an MWS requires to study or review, that critical time is lost. And then the time for review of documentation reduces. So that is another thing. Then lack of marine expertise on project teams again, because when we are talking about synergy, I want to delve this point that synergy is very, very critical when it comes to synergy between the project teams and our MWS. It's very important to synergize in that context also. So lack of marine expertise, again, when the marine warranty surveyor is looking at some expertise from the project team, then we don't find people of that expertise, and again, we're not able to get the message across to the domain experts in the project teams. Late vessel changes, insufficient notice of attendance requirement, which has been already, part of it has been covered, and then lack of clarity of MWS scope, and then insufficient budgets allotted to MWS. This is just few examples. One which I face myself as an marine multi-surveyor as to how the sea fastening has been done for this cargo which was transported. And and it was so difficult for us to make the client also realize that why we are not allowing giving a COA for this kind of sea fastening. I myself was project manager for this, and it was really a big task to make, because I always say that being an MWS is a thankless job. People don't want you there, but just that because a COA is required or a certificate of approval is required, so they just keep us there. This is the slide which I want to discuss now, is budgets incompatible with MWS scope. Now here I have given a comparison between two kinds of operation. One is a topsides installation on your left hand side, and on your right hand side is your manifold installation project. Now we see that the weight which involves the topside installation project may be something around 4,000 metric tons, and the value is around 200 million, more than 200 million dollars. Similarly, for a manifold, the weight is just around 100 metric tons, and the value is around $10 million. But if you see the scope, you need to review the documents for load out, you need to go through the sail away procedures, installation procedures. The number of documentation is not changing. In fact, when it involves, we have seen cases where smaller value projects, by the way of weight or amount, generally have seen that the MWS costs are higher for those kinds of projects as compared to standard or a bigger project. That is because of the complexity of the procedure involved in, say, sometimes in a smaller value project as compared to a larger value projects. This is just a chart wherein we can see that we have topsides and we have manifold